Daddy, why doesn't she want to meet us?
Excuse me?
Logan Carter's hands shook as he knelt beside his crying son in the parking lot. "Daddy, why doesn't she want to meet us?" 5-year-old Mason asked, tears streaming down his face. Logan had no answer. His blind date had cancelled 20 minutes ago. The third woman in 2 months who'd ghosted him after learning he was a single father. Then heels clicked on the pavement. "Excuse me?" A woman's voice cut through the darkness. "Are you okay?" Logan looked up. Standing there in a designer dress was Victoria Mendoza, the tech billionaire whose face was plastered across every business magazine in Seattle. And she was looking at his son with something Logan hadn't seen in years: genuine concern. But before we find out what happens next, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from right now. All right, let me tell you how Logan ended up in that parking lot, broken and desperate for connection. 2 years earlier, Logan Carter had been living what he thought was an ordinary but fulfilling life. At 33, he worked as a mechanical engineer at a mid-sized aerospace company in Seattle, designing components for commercial aircraft. The work was challenging and rewarding, requiring precision and creativity. He'd spent 8 years with the company, earning steady promotions and the respect of his colleagues. His cubicle was decorated with photos of Mason, first smile, first steps, first day of preschool, and detailed sketches of airplane parts covered his desk, alongside coffee-stained engineering manuals. But Logan's real life began when he walked through his front door each evening. His wife, Rachel, would greet him with a kiss and a recap of Mason's latest adventure. Their son was 3 then, a ball of endless energy with Logan's dark hair and Rachel's bright blue eyes. The boy was obsessed with dinosaurs, construction trucks, and making the loudest possible noises at the most inconvenient times. Their townhouse in Ballard was modest, but filled with love. Rachel worked part-time as a graphic designer from home, allowing her to be with Mason during the day while Logan was at the office. She'd turned one room into her studio, walls covered with color swatches and design mock-ups, her desk perpetually cluttered with sketches and half-finished coffee cups. Logan loved watching her work, the way she'd bite her lower lip when concentrating, how she'd hold up color samples to the window light, seeking the perfect shade for a client's logo. They had their routines, their little rituals that made their life feel complete. Wednesday nights were pizza nights, homemade, with Mason helping to spread sauce in chaotic circles while getting more on himself than the dough. Rachel would let him choose the toppings, which usually meant an absurd combination of pepperoni and pineapple that Logan pretended to protest. Friday evenings were movie nights, the 3 of them piled on the couch under blankets, Mason inevitably falling asleep before the end while clutching his stuffed triceratops. Logan remembered one particular evening, about a month before Rachel died. They'd been sitting on their small back porch after putting Mason to bed, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars appear in the Seattle sky. Rachel had leaned her head on his shoulder, intertwined her fingers with his. "Do you ever think about how lucky we are?" she'd asked softly. "Every day," Logan had replied, kissing the top of her head. "I mean it. We have everything that matters. A beautiful sun, work we love, each other. Not everyone gets this." "I know." He'd held her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I don't take it for granted." "Promise me something," she'd said, and there had been something in her voice that made him pay attention. "If something ever happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. Logan, please, just listen." She'd pulled back to look at him, her green eyes serious in the porch light. "If something happens to me, promise you won't shut down. Promise you'll keep living, for Mason, for yourself, He'd laughed it off then, kissed her to change the subject, told her she was being morbid. But now, looking back, it felt like she'd known somehow, like some part of her had been trying to prepare him for the impossible. Sunday mornings were their tradition. Logan would wake early and make chocolate chip pancakes, Mason's favorite, while Rachel slept in. When she finally emerged, they'd eat together at their small kitchen table, Mason usually wearing more chocolate than he consumed. Then they'd pile into their old Honda and drive to Discovery Park, where Mason would run ahead on the trails, pointing out every bird, bug, and interesting stick he encountered. "Look, Daddy, a bird!" Mason would shout, his little finger jabbing toward a common crow. "That's a crow, buddy. See the black feathers?" "It's a dinosaur bird," Rachel would laugh, linking her arm through Logan's. Everything's a dinosaur to him right now. Could be worse, could be a monster truck phase. "Give it time," she'd say with a knowing smile. Logan thought those days would last forever, that their biggest concerns would always be Mason's latest obsession or whether they could afford to upgrade their car, that Rachel would always be there, laughing at Mason's antics and making their house feel like home. Everything shattered on a Tuesday morning in October. Rachel had complained of a headache the night before, nothing unusual. She got migraines occasionally and had medication for them. Logan had kissed her forehead before leaving for work, promised to pick up Thai food for dinner, and told Mason to be good for Mommy. At 11:47 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Is this Logan Carter?" The voice was professional, controlled. "This is Seattle Fire Department. Your wife has been transported to Harborview Medical Center. You need to come immediately." The world tilted. What happened? Is she okay? "Sir, please come to the emergency department. The doctors will explain everything." Logan's hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip his car keys. He ran 3 red lights getting to the hospital, his mind spinning through every possible scenario, each one worse than the last. The emergency room was chaos. Crying children, beeping monitors, the antiseptic smell that burned his nostrils. A nurse led him to a private consultation room, which he immediately knew was a bad sign. The doctor was young, maybe Logan's age, with tired eyes, and the careful expression of someone who delivered terrible news regularly. "Mr. Carter, your wife suffered a cerebral aneurysm. A blood vessel in her brain ruptured. We did everything we could, but the damage was catastrophic. I'm very sorry." Logan heard the words, but they didn't make sense. Rachel was 31, healthy. She jogged. She ate salads. "What do you mean? Where is she?" "She's on life support currently. We're keeping her stable so you can say goodbye and make arrangements." "Goodbye?" The word came out strangled. "She's not dead. You said she's on life support." "Mr. Carter." The doctor's voice was gentle. "She has no brain activity. The Rachel you knew is already gone. I'm sorry." Logan's knees buckled. A nurse caught him, guided him to a chair. This couldn't be real. He'd kissed her this morning. She'd mumbled something about needing more coffee. She was alive. She had to be alive. They let him see her. She looked like she was sleeping, chest rising and falling with the ventilator's rhythm. Machines beeped steadily. Her hand was warm when he held it. Logan collapsed into the chair beside her bed and sobbed, his forehead pressed against her fingers, begging her to wake up, to tell him this was a nightmare, to come back to him and Mason. But she never did. The next 72 hours were a blur of impossible decisions: organ donation paperwork, funeral arrangements, calling Rachel's parents in Michigan and listening to her mother scream through the phone. And somehow, impossibly, having to tell Mason that Mommy wasn't coming home. His son was too young to fully understand. He kept asking when Mommy would be back from the hospital, if she'd bring him a present like she'd promised. Logan would hold him and cry, trying to explain death to a 3-year-old who thought it was something that only happened to dinosaurs. Rachel's parents flew in for the funeral. Her mother, Patricia, was a wreck, barely able to stand during the service. Her father, Donald, was stoic and silent. His jaw clenched so tight Logan thought his teeth might crack. After the burial, after the reception at Logan's house where people brought casseroles and spoke in hushed tones, Patricia pulled Logan aside. "We want to take Mason," she said, her voice raw from crying. "Just for a while, until you get back on your feet." Logan's stomach dropped. "What? No, he needs to be home, with me." "Logan, honey, you're grieving. You're working full-time." "Who's going to watch him during the day? We can give him stability right now. I'm his father. I can figure it out." Donald stepped closer, his expression hard. "Can you? You think you can work and raise a toddler alone? Be realistic." I said no. Logan's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Mason stays with me. He just lost his mother. I'm not sending him away." The argument escalated. Patricia accused him of being selfish. Donald implied he wasn't capable of single parenting. Logan held his ground, even as doubt crept into his mind. Could he do this alone? What if they were right? But when he looked at Mason, sitting on the couch with Rachel's sister, clutching his favorite stuffed triceratops and looking so small and lost, Logan knew. Mason needed him. And Logan needed Mason. They were all each other had left of Rachel. "He's staying with me," Logan repeated firmly. "We're going to be okay." Rachel's parents left the next morning. The coldness in their goodbye made it clear they thought he was making a mistake. Logan watched their rental car disappear down the street and felt utterly alone. The first month was hell. Logan used all his bereavement leave and vacation days, but it wasn't nearly enough. Mason had nightmares every night, waking up screaming for Rachel. Logan would sit on the floor of his son's room until dawn, holding the boy while he cried, singing the lullabies Rachel used to sing, even though his voice cracked and broke. During the day, Mason would forget and ask for Mommy. "When's Mommy coming home? Can Mommy make my lunch? I want Mommy to read me a story." Each question was a knife to Logan's heart. He'd gently remind Mason that Mommy was gone, watch his son's face crumple, and hold him through another wave of grief. Logan couldn't afford to take more time off work. His salary barely covered their mortgage and expenses, and Rachel's freelance income was gone. He scrambled to find childcare. Daycare waiting lists were months long. Private nannies cost more than he made. His own parents had passed away years ago, and he had no siblings. Friends offered to help, but they had their own jobs and families. Finally, a co-worker recommended a woman named Mrs. Chen, who ran an in-home daycare. She was in her 60s, kind but no nonsense, and she had an opening. Logan met her on a Saturday, bringing Mason along. The house smelled like cookies and pine sol. 5 other children were playing in the living room, which had been converted into a play space with bins of toys and a reading nook. "He's been through trauma," Logan explained quietly, while Mason investigated a bin of Lego bricks. "His mother died 6 weeks ago. He has nightmares. Sometimes he gets really upset." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Poor baby. Don't worry, Mr. Carter. I've been doing this for 30 years. We'll take good care of him." Logan wanted to believe her. He had no other choice. Returning to work was agony. Every morning, Logan would drop Mason at Mrs. Chen's house, and his son would cling to him, begging him not to leave. "Daddy, don't go. Stay with me." Logan would pry those small hands off his neck, kiss Mason's tear-stained cheeks, and walk away while his son screamed. He'd sit in his car in Mrs. Chen's driveway and cry before driving to the office. At work, Logan couldn't focus. He'd stare at his computer screen, seeing nothing, miss deadlines, make mistakes in calculations. His boss, a decent man named Tom, pulled him aside after 2 weeks. "Logan, I know you're going through hell. We all understand, but you're not meeting your deliverables. I need to know if you can do this job right now." "I can," Logan said, even though he wasn't sure it was true. "I just need more time." Tom sighed. "Take another week, work from home if you need to, but after that, I need you here, fully here. I'm sorry, I wish I could give you longer." Logan nodded. Another week wouldn't be enough, another year wouldn't be enough, but he had no choice. He had a son to feed, a mortgage to pay, and a life to somehow rebuild from ash. The guilt was crushing. When he was at work, he felt like he was abandoning Mason. When he was home, he was too exhausted and grief-stricken to be the father Mason needed. He'd heat up frozen dinners because he didn't have the energy to cook, let Mason watch too much TV because he couldn't muster the enthusiasm for playtime, go through the motions of bedtime routines while feeling hollowed out inside. The hardest moments were the unexpected ones, walking past Rachel's studio and seeing her half-finished projects still on the desk, finding her hair tie on the bathroom counter, Mason asking innocent questions like, "Why doesn't Daddy smile anymore?" or "Can we call Mommy in heaven?" One Saturday afternoon, about 4 months after the funeral, Logan found Mason in his bedroom closet, holding one of Rachel's scarves to his face. The boy was crying silently, desperately trying to remember what his mother smelled like. Logan had sat on the closet floor with him, both of them clutching Rachel's belongings, sobbing together in the dark. He'd failed at being strong that day, failed at protecting his son from the full weight of their loss. But afterward, Mason had seemed a little lighter, as if finally being allowed to fall apart with his father had given him permission to grieve openly. Logan tried to maintain some of their old rituals, but they felt hollow without Rachel. He attempted the Sunday pancakes once and burned them so badly the smoke alarm went off. Mason had looked at the charred mess and said quietly, "It's okay, Daddy. We can have cereal." The disappointment in his son's eyes had been worse than any criticism. They never tried Sunday pancakes again. Work became Logan's escape and his torment. His colleagues were understanding at first, offering condolences and covering for his mistakes. But as weeks turned to months, Logan could feel their patience wearing thin. He was assigned to less critical projects, left out of important meetings. His annual review, usually glowing, was merely adequate. Tom pulled him aside again. "Logan, I know this is hard, but the company needs to know you're committed. There are younger engineers who want your position." The threat was gentle but clear. Shape up or ship out. Logan couldn't afford to lose his job, not with Mason depending on him, not with a mortgage and endless bills. So he worked harder, stayed later, brought work home. But the more he worked, the less he saw his son. The less he saw Mason, the more the guilt ate at him. It was a vicious cycle with no end in sight. Some nights, after Mason finally fell asleep, Logan would sit in the dark living room and stare at Rachel's photo on the mantel. She was laughing in the picture, her hair wind-blown from a day at the beach, her eyes bright with joy. He'd talk to her sometimes, ask her what he should do, beg her to tell him how to survive this. She never answered. 6 months after Rachel's death, Logan was functioning but not living. He worked, he cared for Mason, he paid the bills. But the joy was gone from everything. Food had no taste. Colors seemed muted. He went through entire days feeling nothing but a dull, persistent ache. Mason was struggling too. Mrs. Chen reported that he had trouble playing with the other children, preferring to sit alone with his dinosaur toys. He'd regressed in his potty training. His speech, which had been advanced for his age, had become more limited. The pediatrician said it was normal for grieving children, but recommended therapy. Therapy meant more bills Logan could barely afford. But he found a child psychologist who specialized in grief and took Mason every Wednesday afternoon. The therapist, Dr. Santos, was patient and warm. She used play therapy, letting Mason express his feelings through toys and art. Slowly, Mason began to improve. The nightmares decreased. He started talking more, but he was different now, quieter, more anxious, always checking to make sure Logan was nearby. "He's afraid you'll disappear too," Dr. B. Santos explained during one of their parent check-ins. "That's normal. He needs consistency and reassurance." Logan tried. He established strict routines, same breakfast every morning, same bedtime every night. He never left Mason without explaining exactly where he was going and when he'd be back. He said, "I love you" a dozen times a day. But he could see the fear in his son's eyes, the way Mason would panic if Logan was even 5 minutes late picking him up. A year passed, then 18 months. Logan and Mason found a new normal. It wasn't the life Logan had imagined, but it was survival. He was proud of that at least. They were still standing, still together. But Logan was profoundly lonely. His married friends drifted away, unable to relate to single parenthood or uncomfortable around his grief. His social life consisted of Mrs. Chen's drop-off chats and occasional exchanges with other parents at the playground. He hadn't been on a date since Rachel died, hadn't even thought about it. The idea felt like a betrayal, but slowly the loneliness began to outweigh the guilt. Logan was only 35. He couldn't imagine never having adult companionship again, never experiencing romance, never having someone to talk to after Mason went to bed. Rachel wouldn't have wanted him to be alone forever. He knew that intellectually. Emotionally, it felt wrong. His co-worker Jenny noticed him staring at his lunch one day, lost in thought. "You okay?" Logan shrugged. "Just tired." "You're always tired." She hesitated. "When's the last time you did something for yourself?" "I don't know. Last year sometime?" "Logan." Jenny's voice was gentle but firm. "You're allowed to have a life. Rachel would want you to be happy. I don't even know what that looks like anymore. Maybe start small. Coffee with a friend. A hobby. Hell, a dating app." Logan laughed bitterly. "Who's going to want to date a widowed single dad?" "Someone who deserves you," Jenny said simply. The conversation stuck with him. That night, after putting Mason to bed, Logan did something he'd been avoiding for 2 years. He pulled out his laptop and searched for dating apps. The profiles were overwhelming. So many smiling faces, people who seemed to have their lives together. Logan felt like a fraud. What did he even have to offer? A dead wife, a traumatized kid, and a one-bedroom townhouse that desperately needed repairs. But he created a profile anyway. He used a photo from before Rachel died. He looked younger, less exhausted. In the bio, he was honest. Single dad to an amazing 5-year-old, mechanical engineer, looking for someone understanding and patient. Starting over is hard, but I'm trying. The responses were mixed. Some women seemed intrigued. Others clearly swiped left the moment they saw single dad. Logan went on a few coffee dates, mostly disasters. One woman spent the entire hour talking about her ex. Another made it clear she had no interest in children. A third seemed nice until Logan mentioned he'd need to leave by 8 to relieve the babysitter, at which point her smile became tight and she excused herself to the bathroom and never came back. Logan was ready to give up when he matched with someone who seemed promising. Her name was Bethany. She was a teacher. Her profile mentioned loving kids. They messaged for a week, the conversation easy and warm. She suggested dinner at an Italian restaurant near the waterfront. Logan was nervous but hopeful. He hadn't felt this way since Rachel, that flutter of anticipation, the careful choosing of an outfit, the wondering if this might be the start of something real. He arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch Mason overnight, packed his son's overnight bag with his favorite pajamas and stuffed triceratops, and dropped him off with promises to pick him up first thing in the morning. Mason had been anxious. "Daddy, you're coming back, right?" "Of course, buddy. I'll be there tomorrow morning for pancakes. I promise." "You promise? Logan knelt down, looked his son in the eyes. "I promise. I love you more than all the dinosaurs in the world." Mason had hugged him tight. "Love you more than all the stars." Logan arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, too anxious to wait in his car. He texted Bethany, "Here whenever you're ready." She responded immediately, "Running a bit late. Be there soon." He waited at the bar, nursing a water, checking his phone every few minutes. 20 minutes passed. 30. He texted again, "Everything okay?" No response. 45 minutes. An hour. Other couples came and went, laughing over wine and pasta. Logan's hope curdled into humiliation. She wasn't coming. He'd been ghosted. Again. Finally, his phone buzzed. "I'm so sorry. Something came up. Can we reschedule?" Logan knew what that meant. He'd heard it before. The polite brush-off, the "something came up," that really meant, "I changed my mind." He typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "No problem. Take care." He sat at that bar for another 10 minutes, feeling pathetic. The bartender gave him a sympathetic look. "Stood up?" "Something like that. First drinks on me." Logan almost accepted, then remembered he had to drive to Mrs. Chen's, had to pick up Mason, had to hold himself together for his son. "Thanks, but I should go." He walked to his car in the parking lot, the cool Seattle evening doing nothing to ease the burning in his chest. He wasn't just disappointed about the date. It was everything. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the relentless grind of single parenthood, the weight of trying to be enough for Mason when he felt like he was barely enough for himself. Logan leaned against his car and for the first time in months let himself cry. Not the silent tears he shed when Mason couldn't see, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his shoulders. He was so tired of being strong, of being alone, of pretending he had this all figured out. "Daddy?" A small voice cut through his misery. Logan's head snapped up. Mason was standing 10 feet away, his little face crumpled with worry. Mrs. Chen was behind him, her hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry," Mrs. Chen said quickly. "He was inconsolable, kept saying you weren't coming back. I didn't know what else to do." Logan wiped his eyes, tried to compose himself. "It's okay. Come here, buddy." Mason ran to him, throwing his arms around Logan's legs. "You're crying. Why are you crying?" Logan picked him up, holding him close. "I'm just sad, Mason. Sometimes grown-ups get sad too." "Is it because of Mommy?" "A little bit. Yeah. I miss Mommy too." Mason's small hand patted Logan's cheek. "But you have me, Daddy. I'm here." The simple words broke something open in Logan's chest. "I know, buddy. You're my whole world." "Why doesn't she want to meet us?" Mason asked suddenly, his face against Logan's shoulder. Logan froze. "What? The lady? You said you were meeting a lady. Why doesn't she want to meet us?" Logan's throat tightened. He hadn't realized Mason understood what the date meant. "It's complicated, buddy. It's not about you." "But everyone always leaves." Mason's voice was so small, so broken. "Mommy left. Now the lady left. Are you going to leave too?" "Never." Logan held his son tighter. "I will never leave you. Never, I promise." They were still standing there, Logan holding Mason and trying not to completely fall apart, when heels clicked on the pavement behind them. "Excuse me." A woman's voice, crisp and confident. "Are you okay?" Logan turned, blinking through tears. The woman standing there was striking, maybe 40, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair pulled into an elegant twist. She wore a black designer dress that probably cost more than Logan's rent and held car keys to a Tesla. Her expression was concerned but guarded, like she was used to dealing with difficult situations, but wasn't quite sure how to handle this one. "We're fine," Logan managed, his voice rough. She looked at Mason, still clinging to Logan's neck, then back at Logan's obviously tear-stained face. "You don't look fine. It's been a rough night." The woman hesitated, clearly debating whether to walk away. Then she sighed. "Look, I don't usually do this, but there's a diner across the street. Can I buy you and your son some coffee? Or hot chocolate for him?" Logan blinked. "Why would you do that?" "Because you look like you could use someone to talk to, and because—" She paused, something flickering in her expression. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone in a parking lot." There was something in her voice, a crack in that polished exterior, that made Logan reconsider his instinct to refuse. He looked at Mason, who was watching the woman with wide, curious eyes. "Hot chocolate has marshmallows?" Mason asked. The woman's lips twitched into a small smile. "I'm sure we can arrange that." Logan should have said no, should have thanked her and driven home, but he was so tired of holding everything together, and the unexpected kindness from a stranger was too tempting to refuse. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Thank you." They crossed the street to Murphy's Diner, a retro-style place with vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. The woman led them to a booth in the back, away from the few other customers. A waitress appeared immediately, her professional smile widening when she saw Logan's companion. "Ms. Mendoza, good to see you again. Your usual?" "Yes, thank you, Diane. And a hot chocolate for the young man, extra marshmallows. What would you like?" She looked at Logan. "Just coffee, black." When the waitress left, the woman, Ms. Mendoza, extended her hand across the table. "Victoria Mendoza." Logan shook it, his hand rough and calloused compared to hers. "Logan Carter, this is my son, Mason." "Hi, Mason. It's nice to meet you." Mason ducked his head shyly but peeked at her through his eyelashes. "You're pretty." Victoria laughed, a genuine sound that softened her whole face. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." Logan felt like he was in a surreal dream. Victoria Mendoza. He recognized the name now. She was the founder and CEO of Mendoza Technologies, a software company that had revolutionized cloud security and made her a billionaire by age 38. Her face had been on the cover of Forbes. She'd been profiled in the Wall Street Journal, and she was sitting across from him in a diner, buying him coffee. "I'm sorry," Logan said. "I'm sure you have better things to do than babysit a stranger's breakdown." "Honestly?" "Not really." Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee cup when it arrived. "I was supposed to be at a charity gala tonight, bailed at the last minute. Sometimes you just can't force yourself to smile and make small talk." "I was supposed to be on a date," Logan admitted. "Got stood up. Her loss. You don't even know me. I know you're a father who clearly loves his son. That's more than I can say for most of the men I've dated." There was a bitter edge to her voice. Mason was happily sipping his hot chocolate, marshmallow residue already on his nose. Victoria reached across the table with a napkin and gently wiped it off. The gesture was so natural, so maternal, that Logan felt his chest tighten. "Do you have kids?" he asked. Victoria's expression shuttered. "No, never found the right time, or the right person." She changed the subject quickly. "What do you do, Logan?" "Mechanical engineer, aerospace components. It's not as exciting as it sounds." "I doubt that. Engineering is problem-solving. There's beauty in that." They talked. Logan wasn't sure how it happened. He was usually so guarded, so reluctant to share his life with strangers. But Victoria had a way of asking questions that made him want to answer. She asked about his work, his hobbies. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had time for a hobby, what he liked about Seattle. She asked about Mason, who was now drawing on a paper placemat with crayons the waitress had provided. "He likes dinosaurs," Logan said, watching his son draw something that might have been a T-Rex or possibly a very angry chicken, and trucks, and asking why about literally everything. "Sounds exhausting." "It is, but he's the best thing in my life." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "You're a single dad." It wasn't a question. Logan nodded. "My wife died 2 years ago. Aneurysm. It was sudden." "I'm sorry." The words were simple but felt sincere. That must have been devastating. Still is some days. Logan took a drink of his coffee, using the motion to steady himself. Mason was only 3. He barely remembers her now, which somehow makes it worse. "You're doing this alone?" "Yeah. Her parents wanted to take him after she died. Said I couldn't handle it. I proved them wrong, but it's been hard. Really hard." Victoria was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "My parents died when I was 12. Car accident. I went to live with my aunt, who resented every moment of it. She made sure I knew I was a burden." She looked up, meeting Logan's eyes. "So I understand what it's like to feel alone, and I think what you're doing, raising your son, keeping him with you, loving him through grief, is incredibly brave." Logan felt something crack in his chest. When was the last time someone had called him brave? When had anyone acknowledged how hard this was? "Thank you," he said quietly. Mason looked up from his drawing. "Daddy, I'm tired." Logan checked his watch. Nearly 10, way past bedtime. "We should go. Thank you for this, Victoria. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She pulled a business card from her purse, scribbled something on the back. "This is my personal number. If you ever need to talk, or if Mason needs anything, call me." Logan took the card, stunned. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Victoria smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "Because sometimes the universe puts people in your path when you need them most. And because I have more money than I know what to do with, and no one to spend it on. Let me help, Logan, please." Logan wanted to refuse. Pride, stubbornness, the same fierce independence that had kept him going for 2 years. But he looked at Mason, drooping against his shoulder, and thought about the bills piling up at home, the car that needed repairs, the constant juggling act of trying to provide for his son on one salary. "Okay," he said finally. "Thank you." He didn't call her for 2 weeks. The business card sat on his kitchen counter, a small, white rectangle he looked at every morning while making Mason's breakfast. Part of him thought it had been a strange dream, that Victoria Mendoza hadn't really sat in a diner with him, hadn't really offered to help. People like her didn't do things like that. But another part of him, the part that was drowning in exhaustion and loneliness, kept staring at that card and wondering what if. The catalyst came on a Wednesday. Logan's car broke down on the way to work. The transmission, the mechanic said, expensive. More expensive than Logan could afford. He'd have to take the bus, which meant leaving an hour earlier and getting home an hour later, which meant less time with Mason, which meant more guilt piled onto the mountain he already carried. That night, after Mason was in bed, Logan sat at his kitchen table with a calculator and his bank statement. The numbers didn't add up. They hadn't for months, but he'd been ignoring the slow bleed of his savings. Car repair, rent, daycare, groceries, utilities, Mason's therapy appointments. There wasn't enough. There was never enough. Logan picked up Victoria's card, stared at the number, put it down, picked it up again. He texted before he could talk himself out of it. "Hi, this is Logan, from the diner. Is your offer still open?" The response came in less than a minute. "Of course. What do you need?" Logan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. His pride screamed at him to delete the message, to handle this himself like he'd handled everything else. But he thought about Mason, about what his son needed, and typed, "My car broke down. I don't know how I'm going to get to work, or take Mason to his therapy appointments. I'm sorry to ask, but—" His phone rang, Victoria's name on the screen. "Logan," she said when he answered. "Where do you live?" he told her. She was quiet for a moment, the sound of typing in the background. "I'm sending a car service to your address tomorrow morning at 7. They'll take you to work and pick you up at the end of the day. They'll also handle Mason's transportation to daycare and any appointments." "Victoria, I can't—" "Yes, you can. You're a single father working your ass off to provide for your son. Let me help. Please." Logan's throat was tight. "I'll pay you back." "I don't want you to pay me back. I want you to let someone help you for once in your life." The car service arrived at 7 the next morning, a sleek black sedan with a driver named Marcus, who greeted Mason with a high five and complimented his dinosaur backpack. It felt surreal, being driven to work in a car that probably cost more than Logan made in a year. His co-workers stared when he got out. Jenny raised her eyebrows so high they nearly reached her hairline. "Did you win the lottery?" she asked when he got to his desk. "Something like that," Logan muttered. The service continued all week. Marcus drove them everywhere with unfailing politeness and patience, even when Mason spilled juice on the leather seats. Victoria texted Logan every evening to make sure everything was working out. The messages were professional but warm, always asking about Mason, always offering more help if needed. Friday evening, she called. "How's the car situation?" "Still in the shop. They're waiting on a part. Should be ready next week." "And how are you doing with the cost?" Logan winced. "I'm figuring it out." "Logan." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I had my assistant call the mechanic. The repair's been paid for." "What? No, Victoria, you can't—" "I already did. Your car will be ready Monday. Marcus will drive you to pick it up. This is too much." Logan was pacing his living room, one eye on Mason playing with Legos on the floor. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because I don't know you. Because I'm not a charity case. Because you've been alone for so long you've forgotten what it's like when people care about you." Victoria's voice softened. "Logan, I'm not doing this because I pity you. I'm doing it because I can, and because I want to. Let me." Logan closed his eyes. "Why? Why do you care?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Can I be honest? Please. I'm lonely. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes and no one to share it with. My relationships are all transactional. Business partners, board members, people who want something from me. You don't want anything. You barely even wanted to accept help with your car. That's rare. You're rare. I'm nothing special." "You're wrong about that." They started talking regularly. Victoria would call in the evenings after Mason went to bed, and they'd talk for hours, about work, about life, about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up poor after her parents died, how her aunt had made her feel worthless, how she'd put herself through MIT on scholarships and spite, how she'd built her company from nothing, proving everyone who doubted her wrong, how success had brought money and respect but not happiness. Victoria shared stories Logan had never heard in her business profiles, about sleeping in her car during her first year at MIT because she couldn't afford both tuition and rent, about eating ramen for 6 months straight, about her first investor meeting where a venture capitalist had told her to "come back when you have a man on your team who understands technology." She'd built a multi-billion-dollar company specifically to prove that man wrong. "The thing about success," Victoria said one night, her voice quiet over the phone, "is that everyone assumes it fills all the empty spaces inside you, but it doesn't. I can buy anything I want, go anywhere, do anything, and I come home to a penthouse so quiet I can hear my own heartbeat. Money can't buy what you have with Mason, that connection, that unconditional love." "That love comes with a price too," Logan admitted. "The fear of losing him, of not being enough for him, of screwing him up permanently because I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I see when I look at you two? I see a father who shows up every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Do you know how rare that is?" Logan told her about Rachel, about the life they'd built and lost, about the crushing weight of grief and single parenthood, about the fear that he wasn't enough for Mason, that he was failing at the one job that mattered most. He told her things he'd never told anyone, about the panic attacks he'd had in grocery store parking lots, about the nights he'd sat in his car crying before going into daycare pickup, about the constant terror that something would happen to Mason and he'd be completely alone. Victoria listened without judgment, offered comfort without platitudes. She didn't try to fix him or minimize his pain. She just listened, really listened, in a way no one had since Rachel died. "You're not failing," she said one night. "You're surviving. That's not the same thing. It doesn't feel like enough. Mason has a father who loves him, who shows up every day, who's doing everything possible to give him a good life. That's more than enough, Logan. That's everything." 2 months after they'd met in that parking lot, Victoria asked if she could take them to dinner, a real dinner, at a nice restaurant. Logan's first instinct was to refuse. He didn't have clothes nice enough, didn't want Mason to feel out of place. But Victoria insisted, and somehow Logan found himself putting on his one good suit, while Mason wore the button-down shirt Rachel's mother had sent for his 5th birthday. The restaurant was the kind of place Logan had only seen in movies. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, a wine list thicker than some books. The host greeted Victoria by name and led them to a private table near the windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Mason's eyes were huge, taking in everything. "Is this fancy?" he whispered to Logan. "Very fancy. Best manners, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." Victoria ordered for them, something she did with easy confidence, suggesting dishes she thought they'd like. She was right. The food was incredible, and she'd made sure there were chicken fingers and fries for Mason, elegantly presented, but still recognizable. "This is the best chicken I ever had," Mason announced, ketchup on his chin. Victoria laughed. "I'm glad you approve." Over dinner, Logan found himself relaxing. Victoria made it easy. She asked Mason about his dinosaurs, listened seriously to his rambling explanations of why T-Rex was the best dinosaur ever, and didn't bat an eye when he insisted on acting out a velociraptor attack with his chicken fingers. She treated him like a person, not an inconvenience, and Logan felt something shift in his chest. After Mason fell asleep at the table, his head on Logan's shoulder, Victoria reached across and gently brushed a strand of hair from the boy's face. "He's wonderful," she said softly. "He's my world." "I can see that," she met Logan's eyes. "And I'm starting to understand why." Logan's heart was pounding. "Victoria, I know this is complicated. You're a single father. You're still grieving, and I'm me. But I need you to know that I care about you, both of you, more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time." Logan swallowed hard. "I care about you too, but I come with baggage, a lot of it." "So do I." Victoria smiled. "Maybe we can carry it together." They started dating, though calling it that felt insufficient. It was more like building a life together, piece by careful piece. Victoria was patient with Mason's anxiety, never pushing, always letting him come to her. She learned his favorite dinosaurs, bought him books about paleontology, and sat through endless viewings of Jurassic Park. When Mason had a nightmare one evening while they were having dinner at her penthouse, Victoria didn't hesitate. She'd followed Logan to Mason's temporary bedroom, stood in the doorway watching as Logan comforted his son, and when Mason finally asked through his tears if Miss Victoria could read him a story, her eyes had filled with tears. She'd sat on the edge of Mason's bed reading The Land Before Time in a soft voice while the boy's breathing slowly steadied. Logan had watched from the doorway, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. This was the moment, he'd realized. The moment he knew Victoria wasn't just someone he was dating. She was someone who could be part of their family. The relationship progressed in small, meaningful steps. Victoria started keeping dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets in her freezer. Logan left a toothbrush at her place. Mason asked if they could invite Miss Tori to his therapy session's family day. Dr. Santos had watched Victoria interact with Mason, patient, attentive, genuinely interested in his dinosaur facts, and later told Logan, "That woman loves your son, and more importantly, she respects your grief. That's rare." She was patient with Logan too, understanding when grief hit him out of nowhere, when he needed to talk about Rachel, when he had to cancel plans because Mason was having a hard night. One evening, Logan had broken down completely, triggered by a song that had been played at Rachel's funeral. Victoria had held him while he sobbed, didn't try to shush him or fix it, just let him feel everything. Afterward, as he'd apologized for ruining their date night, she'd cupped his face in her hands. "Logan, grief doesn't have a timeline. Rachel was your wife, Mason's mother. She'll always be part of your story. I'm not trying to erase her or replace her. I'm just asking to be part of what comes next." She never made him feel guilty for putting his son first. In fact, she seemed to respect him more for it. "You're a good father," she told him one evening. They were at her penthouse apartment, a space so vast and modern it felt like something from a design magazine, while Mason played with the train set Victoria had bought for her place, insisting she wanted him to have toys there. "I'm trying," Logan said. "You're succeeding." She took his hand. "I know you don't always see it, but you are. Mason is happy, loved. That's because of you." Logan pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You were yourself, that's all." Their relationship deepened slowly. Victoria met Logan's co-workers at a company picnic, charming everyone with her easy humor and lack of pretension. Logan met Victoria's business partners at a fundraising gala, feeling out of place in his rented tux, but grounded by her hand in his. Mason began calling Victoria Tori and asking when she'd come over, running to the door when she arrived. 6 months in, Victoria asked Logan and Mason to move in with her. They were at the park, watching Mason play on the swings. Victoria had bought him ice cream, and he was covered in chocolate, laughing as he pumped his legs higher and higher. "I know it's fast," Victoria said, not looking at Logan, "but my place is huge and mostly empty. You're paying rent you can't afford. Mason could have his own room, a playroom, a yard. And she paused. "I want to come home to you. Both of you. I want this to be real." Logan's heart was racing. "Victoria, are you sure? Moving in with a single dad and his 5-year-old is a lot." "I've never been more sure of anything." She turned to him, her eyes serious. "I love you, Logan, and I love Mason. I want to be part of your lives, if you'll have me." Logan kissed her, right there on the park bench, pouring 2 years of loneliness and grief and desperate hope into it. When they broke apart, Victoria was smiling, her eyes bright. "Is that a yes?" "That's a hell yes." They told Mason that night. He was thrilled about the idea of a bigger room and a yard, but anxious too. "Will you still be my daddy if we live with Tori?" he asked, his small face worried. Logan knelt down, took his son's hands. "Always. Nothing will ever change that. Tori's not replacing anyone. She's just adding more love to our family." "More love is good, right? More love is the best thing in the world." Moving in was chaotic and wonderful. Victoria's penthouse transformed. Mason's room filled with dinosaur posters and toy bins. The sterile living room gained family photos and crayon drawings stuck to the fridge with magnets. Victoria hired a part-time nanny so Logan didn't have to rely on Mrs. Chen, a kind woman named Lucia, whom Mason adored. For the first time in 2 years, Logan felt like he could breathe. He had help. He had support. He had someone who loved him and his son unconditionally. The guilt he'd carried, the fear that he was failing, that he wasn't enough, began to ease. But not everyone was happy about their new arrangement. Rachel's parents called 2 weeks after the move. Logan hadn't spoken to them in over a year. Their relationship had deteriorated after the funeral, strained by their belief that Logan couldn't properly care for Mason alone. "We heard you're living with some woman," Patricia said without preamble. "Is that true?" Logan's jaw tightened. "Her name is Victoria, and yes, we're living together. You're exposing our grandson to a stranger, someone you barely know. I've known Victoria for almost a year. She's been amazing with Mason." "He needs stability, Logan, not a parade of women through his life." "There's no parade. Victoria is it. I love her." Patricia's voice turned cold. "You loved Rachel, or have you already forgotten her?" The words hit like a slap. Logan forced himself to take a breath. "I will never forget Rachel, but she's gone, and I'm still here. I'm allowed to move forward." "Move forward? It's been barely 2 years. You're being selfish." "Selfish? I've dedicated every moment of the past 2 years to Mason. I've given up everything to make sure he's okay. Victoria makes us both happy. She's good for him." "She's rich, you mean? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You found yourself a meal ticket." Logan's temper snapped. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Victoria cares about Mason. She cares about me. This isn't about money." "Then what is it about? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're replacing Rachel with the first wealthy woman who paid you attention." "This conversation is over." Logan's hand was shaking around the phone. "Unless you can be respectful, don't call again. We want to see Mason. We have rights as his grandparents. You haven't asked to see him once in a year. You don't get to suddenly care now because you disapprove of my life choices." "Logan!" He hung up, stood in the middle of Victoria's, their, kitchen, breathing hard. Victoria appeared in the doorway, concern written across her face. "I heard. I'm sorry." "Don't be. They have no right," his voice cracked. "They have no right to make me feel guilty for being happy." Victoria crossed the room, pulled him into her arms. "You're allowed to be happy. You're allowed to love someone. Rachel would want that for you." "I know, I just—" Logan closed his eyes. "Part of me still feels like I'm betraying her." "That's grief talking. But Logan, you're not betraying anyone. You're living. That's what Rachel would want. That's what anyone who loved you would want." He held her tighter. "I love you. I love you too." Mason adjusted to their new life with surprising ease. He loved the penthouse, loved having Lucia to play with during the day, loved that Victoria was there for dinner and bedtime stories. He started calling her Mom 4 months in, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. They were at breakfast. Victoria had made pancakes. She'd learned from Logan, though hers were less creative shapes and more functional circles. Mason took a bite, syrup on his chin, and said, "Thanks, Mom. These are good." Victoria froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Her eyes met Logan's across the table, wide and uncertain. Logan nodded, smiling, giving her permission. "You're welcome, sweetheart," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. Later, after Mason was at school, she cried in Logan's arms. "I never thought I'd get to be someone's mom. You're amazing at it. He's an amazing kid. You both are." A year after they'd met in that parking lot, Victoria proposed. Not to Logan, technically, to both of them. She took them to the park where they'd had their first real conversation about moving in together. It was a Saturday morning, sunny and warm. Mason was feeding ducks at the pond, tossing breadcrumbs with intense concentration. Victoria pulled Logan aside, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know this is unconventional," she said, "but nothing about us has been conventional. Logan Carter, will you marry me?" Logan laughed, tears in his eyes. "I was going to ask you next month. I already bought a ring." "So is that a yes?" "That's a hell yes," they told Mason together, both of them kneeling in the grass while he stared at them with wide eyes. "Tori and I are getting married," Logan said. "That means we'll be a family, officially." "We're already a family," Mason said, like it was obvious. Victoria laughed. "You're absolutely right. But now it'll be legal. Can I be in the wedding? You're going to be the most important part." They married 3 months later in a small ceremony in Victoria's penthouse, surrounded by close friends and colleagues. Mason was the ring bearer, taking his job with utmost seriousness. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Mason piped up, "I object to waiting any longer. Can they kiss now?" The room erupted in laughter. Victoria and Logan exchanged their vows through happy tears, and when they kissed, Mason cheered loudest of all. Their life wasn't perfect. Mason still had hard days, still missed Rachel, still needed therapy to process his grief and anxiety. Victoria's work was demanding, requiring long hours and frequent travel. Logan struggled with guilt sometimes, feeling like he should be doing more, providing more, even though Victoria constantly reassured him that he was enough. There were challenges unique to blending their lives. Victoria had to learn that parenting wasn't something you could schedule or optimize like a business meeting. That sometimes Mason needed her to sit through a 40-minute explanation of why velociraptors were actually covered in feathers, even when she had conference calls waiting. Logan had to learn to accept help without feeling like he was failing, to let Victoria make decisions about Mason's care, to trust that her love for his son was real, not performative. They had their first real fight 3 months after the wedding. Victoria had scheduled a family trip to Europe without consulting Logan, assuming he'd be thrilled. Instead, he'd felt steamrolled, like she was trying to buy their happiness, to swoop in and fix problems with money instead of understanding that some things couldn't be fixed that way. They'd argued for hours, voices raised, old wounds reopened. Mason had hidden in his room, scared by the yelling, which had made everything worse. In the end, they'd sat on the floor of their bedroom, exhausted and raw, and really talked. About boundaries and communication, about Logan's fear of losing his identity as Mason's father, about Victoria's fear that without her money she had nothing to contribute, about how they both had to choose every day to build this family together. "I don't need your money," Logan had said, holding her hands. "I need you, the woman who reads dinosaur books in funny voices, who learns the names of all Mason's stuffed animals, who cries at animated movies. That's who I fell in love with." "And I don't need you to be grateful," Victoria had replied, tears streaming down her face. "I need you to be my partner, to tell me when I'm being controlling, to let me be part of decisions, not just funding them." They'd apologized to Mason together, explained that grown-ups fight sometimes, but it doesn't mean they don't love each other. Mason had looked between them with his serious blue eyes and said, Mommy and Daddy used to fight about what color to paint my room, but then they'd have ice cream and laugh about it. The simple memory of Rachel, offered without pain, had made all three of them cry, but afterward something had shifted. They'd gone out for ice cream, the three of them, and talked about painting Mason's room in his new favorite color, a bright blue he called dinosaur egg blue. It wasn't about forgetting Rachel. It was about making space for new memories while honoring the old ones. But they were happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy. They were a family, chosen and built from broken pieces, but solid and real. 2 years after their wedding, Victoria came home from a doctor's appointment with news that shocked them both. She was pregnant. At 42, after being told for years that she likely couldn't have children, she was having a baby. "I don't know how this happened," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The doctor said it was basically a miracle." Logan pulled her close, his own eyes wet. "We're full of miracles, apparently." Victoria's pregnancy wasn't easy. She had severe morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester. There were complications. A scare at 16 weeks, where they thought they'd lost the baby. Bed rest ordered at 30 weeks due to high blood pressure. Logan took family leave from work, something his company had never allowed before, but Victoria's lawyers had quietly ensured was protected. He spent those weeks caring for Victoria, managing her doctor appointments, keeping Mason's routine stable, and terrified that after everything they'd built, they might lose this too. But Mason, at 7 years old, became their rock in an unexpected way. He'd bring Victoria water without being asked, draw pictures of their family, 4 stick figures now instead of 3, and tape them to her bedroom walls, read to her from his dinosaur books when she was too nauseated to look at screens. One evening, Logan found him sitting beside Victoria's bed, his small hand on her belly, talking softly to his unborn sibling. "It's okay in there," Mason was saying. "You don't have to be scared. We're all waiting for you. And I'm going to teach you everything about dinosaurs and being brave and—" His voice had dropped to a whisper. "And about our first mom, too. Mommy Rachel. She was really nice. You would have liked her." Logan had stood in the hallway, silent tears streaming down his face, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. His son, who'd lost so much, was making space in his heart for more family, was choosing to remember Rachel while embracing their new life. It was the bravest thing Logan had ever witnessed. They told Mason about the pregnancy that night after Victoria's doctor appointment confirmed everything was progressing well. At 7 years old, he was old enough to understand what it meant, and his reaction was pure joy. "I'm going to be a big brother, really." "Really?" Victoria confirmed. "Can we name the baby T-Rex?" "Probably not," Logan said, laughing. "Fine, but can it be a dinosaur name at least?" They compromised on Rex if it was a boy, which it was. Rex Carter Mendoza was born on a snowy December morning, healthy and loud and perfect. The delivery had been complicated, an emergency C-section after Victoria's blood pressure spiked dangerously, but both mother and baby came through it safely. Logan had held Victoria's hand through the whole thing, whispering promises that everything would be okay, that he couldn't lose her too, that their family was just beginning. When they finally brought Rex home, Mason was waiting with a sign he'd made. "Welcome home, baby brother Rex," decorated with hand-drawn dinosaurs. He'd insisted on wearing his best shirt, the one Victoria had bought him for the wedding, because first impressions matter, Dad. Mason was obsessed with his baby brother from the first moment, insisting on helping with every diaper change, every feeding, every bath. He took his role as big brother with the utmost seriousness, explaining to anyone who would listen that he had very important responsibilities now. "I'm going to teach him about dinosaurs," Mason declared, holding Rex with careful, practiced gentleness, and how to be brave, and that it's okay to be sad sometimes. Logan watched his son, this incredible, resilient boy who'd survived so much, cradle his baby brother, and felt his heart might burst. He looked at Victoria, exhausted and radiant in the hospital bed, and at the family they'd built from loss and loneliness and chance encounters in parking lots. "You okay?" Victoria asked softly. "I'm more than okay," Logan said. "I'm home." 5 years later, Logan stood in the backyard of their house. They'd moved from the penthouse to an actual house with a yard when Rex started walking, and watched his sons play. Mason was 12 now, tall and gangly, teaching 5-year-old Rex how to identify different dinosaur species using a set of toy figures. Rex was asking a million questions, just like Mason had at that age, and Mason answered each one with patience and enthusiasm. The house was in a quiet neighborhood in Bellevue, with a big backyard, perfect for kids, and a garage where Logan had set up a workshop. Victoria had insisted on keeping the penthouse for work purposes, but this was home. The walls were covered with family photos: Logan and Rachel's wedding, baby Mason, Rachel's memorial photo in a place of honor, then newer photos: Logan and Victoria's wedding, Mason holding baby Rex, family vacations, birthday parties, ordinary Tuesday dinners that felt extraordinary because they were together. They'd made a tradition of talking about Rachel with the boys. Mason shared his fading memories, and Logan filled in the gaps with stories. Rex would never know her, but he knew about her, knew that his big brother had another mommy who loved him very much, knew that sometimes Mason got sad on her birthday, and that was okay, knew that you could love someone you'd lost and still build a beautiful life. Last week, Mason had come to Logan with a question. "Dad, is it okay that I love Mom, Victoria, as much as I loved Mommy Rachel?" Logan had pulled his son close. "Mason, love doesn't run out. Your heart didn't replace Rachel with Victoria. It expanded to make room for both of them. That's what love does. It grows. But I don't want to forget Mommy Rachel. You won't. We won't let you. And Victoria doesn't want you to forget either. She loves you enough to make sure Rachel is always part of our family." Mason had nodded, seemed to accept this, then added with the brutal honesty of a 12-year-old, "Rex is pretty lucky. He gets 2 big people who love him from the start. I only got 1 for a while, but I guess I got lucky too. I got 3 people who loved me total, even if I can't see one of them anymore." Out of the mouths of children came wisdom that broke and healed you simultaneously. Victoria came up behind Logan now, wrapped her arms around his waist, her chin resting on his shoulder as they watched their boys play. "What are you thinking about?" "That night in the parking lot, when you found us." "Best decision I ever made. Coming over to talk to us." "That, and everything that came after." She turned him to face her, her dark eyes soft. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd walked past? If I'd minded my own business?" Logan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "Every day, and every day I'm grateful you didn't." "Me too." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Do you think Rachel would approve? Of us? Of how we're raising Mason?" It wasn't the first time she'd asked, and Logan knew it wouldn't be the last. Victoria carried her own grief, the grief of never getting to thank Rachel for creating the boy she loved like her own son, the weight of wondering if Rachel would have trusted her with this family. "I think," Logan said carefully, "that Rachel would see how happy Mason is, how loved he feels, how you've honored her memory while giving him a future. I think she'd be grateful that her son has someone who loves him as fiercely as you do." "Me too." They stood there, watching their boys play in the fading sunlight, the sound of their laughter filling the air. Logan thought about Rachel sometimes, wondered if she could see them, if she approved of the life he'd built. He liked to think she did, that she was happy he'd found happiness again, that Mason had a family who loved him, that he'd found someone who made him whole. Life hadn't turned out the way Logan had planned. The future he'd imagined with Rachel had died with her, but standing here, with Victoria in his arms and his sons playing in the yard, Logan realized something profound. Sometimes the life you don't plan is the one you needed all along. "Daddy! Mom!" Rex called from across the yard. "Come see! Mason taught me to roar like a T-Rex." Logan and Victoria exchanged a smile and walked hand in hand toward their boys, toward their family, toward the life they'd built together from parking lot tears and unexpected kindness, toward home.